Welcome to the Melodology podcast, celebrating the unsung excellence of melody makers. My name is Arthur Breur. I am your host. I am a composer, and today I am joined by a multi-talented composer and, well, let's just go ahead and get into his bio because there's a lot going on with Scott Halgren. Scott Halgren is a composer, musician, and sound editor. Over the last decade, Scott's scores have served a diverse and successful group of independent films and television programs and have received critical acclaim. Scott's varied talents as an arranger, composer, and performer have also been featured on numerous albums by artists such as Donna Summer, Tanya Dennis, the history and genre spanning This Is My America, New Age artist Say, Night Ranger, and Texas guitar hero Monty Montgomery. Welcome to the Melodology podcast, Scott Halgren.
Arthur, thank you so much for having me. It is really an honor to be here, and I'm very grateful.
Well, this is going to be a little bit different from previous podcasts that we've done so far. We have not yet had a straight up jazz piece on this podcast yet. So that's going to be something that's a little bit different, and I'm excited about it. My music is definitely, my own composing is definitely influenced by jazz, although I am personally square as a board when it comes to playing music. My background, of course, because jazz is so just ubiquitous throughout all of our culture in American music, jazz is definitely something that's influenced me. Jazz indirectly through music, for example, like the music of John Williams in film scores. Because he was a jazz player, and his music has jazz chords in these great big orchestral pieces that come across like they're classical sounding pieces, but they've got these kind of crunchy harmonies in them. So, Scott, let's go ahead and talk about your early memories and your development in music and in melodies.
I think the earliest stuff that I can think of probably would be as a little boy riding around with mom and my brother in the car, and AM radio would play a steady stream of things. And certainly something that sticks out in my mind would be maybe Stevie Wonder, Sunshine of My Life, which is just, it's got a beautiful melody, and anything Stevie does has this care to it. He's just such a wonder with those things. And so I think that kind of sticks out. And then, of course, in 1977, I was with my parents and my brother for the opening day of Star Wars, because my dad was a comic book nerd, and we that just neatly removed the top of my head, and we had to go purchase the cassette to play on my realistic tape player at home. And so I wore that thing out. So I feel really lucky that I grew up in a time of a rebirth of movies, and also probably the golden age of American songwriting. So,
oh, very much so. Well, and so many good songs were written and performed and played in the 60s and 70s and 80s and all of that time period, because we have really a century of just amazing songwriting in this country, before now. And even before that, there have been a ton of great songs composed and written, which is why I started this podcast in the first place.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Oh, yeah, and I describe exactly the same thing with my experience seeing Star Wars at the age of 9 when I saw it, and I say my head exploded. And I had it on vinyl. I didn't have it on cassette. I had the two-sided album on vinyl, and it was something that was a transformative experience for a lot of people, including a lot of 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that goes ahead and answers the question that I usually ask: are you a film score fan?
Yes, I am absolutely a film score fan. Yeah, no, it is. If you had asked 12-year-old, 18-year-old me what I thought I would be doing right now, the furthest thing from my mind would be writing film scores, not because I wouldn't think of it, but just because I didn't think that it would, I didn't even know that was a thing necessarily, and couldn't even imagine doing it. And that's been a lovely journey of discovery in this last almost 2 decades now.
Yeah. I think it was when I was listening to the Star Wars album that I decided something that I wanted to do in my life was make people cry intentionally by giving them beautiful music, by giving them something that takes them on an emotional journey. Being able to, it's fun to describe it this way, but being able to manipulate people, and it's your job.
Yeah.
It comes across as just something it's really meaningful to me to be able to help people feel emotions and to move people through a story like that.
Absolutely. And to be able to help, tell that story in another way, in a way that they can take with them. And my favorite part of all of this, and I'm going to exclude MTV, but all of these film scores and all of these songs or pieces, if they're not immediately associated with a visual, we get to make up our own mind about what they are to us and how they feel to us. Or if they're associated with a visual that we felt strongly about, they bring back that sense of awe, that sense of discovery, that sense of trepidation, perhaps, in our minds. And so to be able to evoke those emotions, I think is a lifetime of fun and challenge to learn how to sort of meet those requirements, whether it's dramatic or comedic or anything in between. So, yeah, that's the best. I think it's the best part about what we do.
So, where does jazz come into your life?
That's a great question. I was a trombonist in middle school and high school, and I was actually good enough to make all-state orchestra my senior year in Kentucky. And right around my heavy metal days in 1985 and 86, I was pilfering through some of my stepfather's cassettes and found an album by a guy named Pat Metheny. And that album was a two album live record called Travels, and it blew the top of my head off. And I said, man, if this is good, then the next record or album or tape of his I found was an album by some guy named Miles Davis called Kind of Blue. And after the two of those things, I was hooked. And then something even more amazing happened. The Paramount Arts Center in Ashland, Kentucky, population less than 40,000, was refurbished and reopened, and acts that I would never have heard of came through. Everybody from Joan Baez to Victor Borge to Mummenschanz to Tony Bennett to Doc Severeinsen, Chuck Mangione, all these people came through, and my parents got a membership as a reopener, and they couldn't make it to a lot of them. So I would go to these concerts just to hear music. I didn't even know who these people were. There was no internet. They didn't have the records. And the first concert I went to was Tony Bennett. And after the show, I went down to talk to, I saw the bass player standing by the side of the stage, and he was so nice to me. And he said, "Do you want to meet Tony?" And I was like, sure, not knowing the gravitas of what I was encountering of a career. And he was so kind and so thoughtful and so encouraging about having a career in this thing what we did, that I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And so after flirting with a music degree, my first 2 years of college at Wake Forest, I transferred to the University of Miami and quickly became a very small fish in a very large pond. And let's just say I made it out of there alive. But that was a fantastic formative experience, and it really helped me expand my horizons a little bit more in a way that I probably wouldn't have gotten in many other cases. And it helped me along my musical journey, because I really didn't start taking formal piano lessons until college. And so that was sort of a remarkable. I jumped in, and my career as a professional has mostly been as a piano player. So that's been pretty wild. But yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I feel sometimes like I've been fumbling toward ecstasy, and sometimes that I just sort of am the luckiest guy in the world for how things have turned out. So
for this particular piece we're going to be talking about today, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat by Charles Mingus, when did you first hear this piece?
Okay, so this is why I mentioned Pat Metheny. So I had a kind of an influencer in high school named Dave Ridenour, and Dave somehow his brother and his dad had the coolest, hippest albums of anything that was coming out. And I'm talking like not the guys playing Boston and Billy Joel downstairs in the basement while you're playing pool. I'm talking like this guy had Keith Jarrett and like crazy other things that no high school kid, was probably be actually listening to. And he says, you have to check out this Joni Mitchell album. And I'm like, okay. He's like, the players on it are insane. It's Pat Metheny, Lyle Mays, Michael Brecker, Jaco Pastorius, and Don Elias. And it's insane. And I was like, okay. And so my first experience hearing Goodbye Pork Pie Hat was hearing Joni Mitchell sing it with the lyrics that she wrote for her 1979 album, Mingus, a tribute to Charles. And he died during the making of the album, apparently. But these were her original lyrics, but they were true to the spirit of the song. So I heard that, and it was like, wow. And so as one does sometimes, I have found my way back to the original version and other versions. Then I found out other artists had performed this song. But I got to give Joni and crew credit. They were very much true to the intent of the song and everything, and it's an absolutely lovely live version at the Hollywood Bowl.
Well, let me go ahead and read about Goodbye Pork Pie Hat.
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye Pork Pie Hat is a jazz instrumental composed by Charles Mingus, originally recorded by his sextet in 1959 and released on his album Mingus Ah. It was subsequently released on his 1963 album Mingus, 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 as theme for Lester Young, and 1977's 3 or 4 Shades of Blues. Composed in E-flat minor, Mingus wrote it as an elegy for saxophonist Lester Young, who had died 2 months prior to the recording session, and who was known for wearing unusually broad-brimmed pork pie hats. One of Mingus's best-known compositions, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, became a jazz standard, recorded by other jazz and jazz fusion artists.
I have to say, 1959 was an incredible year for jazz. In that year, not only did Mingus come out with several things that would become standards, but that was also the year Kind of Blue was released, and Miles Davis released 4 other albums that year. The Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers album, Moanin', came out that year, which is just loaded with things. Ornette Coleman's groundbreaking free jazz album, The Shape of Jazz to Come, came out that year. Dave Brubeck's Time Out album came out that year. The first Nina Simone album came out that year. You think about how amazing all of that music coming out is, and it's just we're really blessed that these things happen the way that they do, because it's a remarkable testament to the things that American jazz artists were doing at that time, and certainly in that time in the country was not necessarily as enlightened as it is now. So it's a pretty remarkable artistic statement, an artistic year.
How would you describe jazz in terms of the way that it's performed and the way that it's thought of in comparison to other genres of, say, classical or pop or whatever else?
Well, I think speaking with very broad strokes, one of the things that people struggle with jazz is getting the feel right. And a lot of that is because, and again, this rule begins to peter out the more subsets you talk about. But In straight up swinging jazz and blues, you're working with an eighth note triplet with a ghosted second note. And I think of being a musician like being an athlete. We have to train for the different things that we're going to do. And me getting that swing feel, that was really hard because it's not something that necessarily comes to you naturally, even if you've listened to a lot of the music. So I think the rhythmic element is really super important to solve for yourself as a player and for your conception as a writer. And then I think another thing is, and the jazz guys, the old jazz guys wouldn't mind me saying this at all, those cats were Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, Duke Ellington. They were all grabbing scores of everything from Debussy and Ravel to David Raxon, Hollywood scores and everything. And they were taking a lot of that 20th century tonal harmony and incorporating it into what they did. And I think modes are really, and really jazz is based on, and this is an academic argument, but jazz is really based on the Dorian sharp 7 mode, which is essentially melodic minor without bringing the notes down on the way down. It just stays up. So I think it's rhythm, and I think it's harmonic language. And then, the great composers in jazz, and I would put Mingus up there at the top, and Monk and Wayne Shorter. Certainly there's some other people I'm leaving out, but those composers just began stretching melodies, began developing things, began moving beyond forms and whatnot, or in Mingus's case, doing remarkable things that are hidden right there on the page, and have allowed it to have its own language and to step into its own particular space, if you will, in what we like to refer to as modern music. And I'm really trying to give a lot of credit because it's continued to grow, and that's been fantastic. And we'd probably talk for a long time about the various sundry things, but I think those three things really kind of encapsulate what makes it a little different. And again, classical music has its own set of standards. Rock music, to a certain extent, once you get to a certain level, also has some standards that you kind of have to abide by. Rock and pop stuff, especially if we're talking about that golden age of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, but yeah, it's very much, as we talked about, its own language, its own dialect of things, but still related to the broader thing. So.
Yeah, and in performance of jazz, you have the practice of playing the melody through and then playing the chords through as the different players show off their chops in improvising and creating music on the fly right there in a piece of music that never has existed before and is being created live by a human being right there, right out of their mind and out of their hands. So a lot of times jazz is as much about the chord progressions as it is about the melody that goes with them, because a lot of the performance, or a lot of the part that you hear, is the chords that are behind the melody performed without the melody.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And the notion that you can substitute those chords for other chords. John Coltrane, when he came out with Giant Steps, literally came out with an entirely new harmonic system based on major thirds and their relationships to each other. And that changed the language as well. And, there are people who can create chord substitutions for things that have nothing to do with the two bars that you have, but as long as you arrive at the chord in the third bar, there are really tricky ways to do that. It doesn't affect anything, especially if someone is improvising rather than playing the original melody over it. And what that's done is free up improvisers to try new things, different things, to not necessarily be held down to just what's on the page. It's really kind of remarkable.
For non-musical folks, the idea of substituting a chord, you normally are playing a given set of chords when you're playing a piece of music, and you sort of expect that there's going to be a particular sound behind the melody that you're listening to. But then what you can do is you can play a different chord behind your notes and your melody, and it gives it a different mood. It gives the melody a different setting. So you end up with a different feeling in that moment in the melody than maybe you had before. And sometimes it can be surprise, or it can be uneasy, or it can be, it can just be melancholy or whatever, but it can change the mood of that moment. And also, if you're always used to hearing exactly that same chord progression over and over and over again, somebody throws in something new and you're just, oh, wow, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it's
it
fresh.
gives you a new experience. Yeah, gives a freshness to it.
Fresh.
Good word.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lovely thing, and it becomes a challenge, sort of a next level challenge once you have mastered being able to get around on things. Okay, what kind of substitutions can I play? What kind of different chords does this sax player like over whatever the guitar player likes and whatnot? And you start really developing or helping your colleagues develop an individual personality for what you as a player prefer doing. So.
Anything else to say about this piece or about jazz before we start looking at it?
I would say that I mentioned Joni Mitchell's Shadows and Light album in 1980 and her Mingus album, which this song is on also, came out in 79. And then the most interesting version of this I found is Jeff Beck's version from 1976, played in his usual way on the album Wired, which I believe he's also got a movement of a Mahler symphony, the second movement of a Mahler symphony on there as well.
Wow.
So it's sort of a remarkable thing, and also a tribute to this as a piece of melody that people are really familiar with. So,
well, I will include links to each of those different things in the show notes if anybody wants to listen to those. And let's go ahead and take a break, and we will come back and we'll start taking a look at and walking through the melody for Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. Welcome back to the Melodology podcast, celebrating the unsung excellence of melody makers. My name is Arthur Breur. I'm your host, and I am here today with Scott Halgren. I do want to point out real quick, if there is a noticeable difference in my audio, I realized after the first part that I had been recording using my headset microphone instead of the microphone that is right in front of my face. So if the sound is noticeably different, that's why, and I apologize. We are talking about a piece of music by Charles Mingus called Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. We are going to start looking at this now and listening to it, walking through it, just like I say, walking through it as if it is as if it's a path that we're walking along and we've never seen any of this before. What are you seeing there?
If I'm taking the 30,000 foot view, I see a really small phrase, an arc, happening over that two measures there, and I'm thinking that the intervals are really close. We're seeing nothing more than a fourth there, and the rest of it's really seconds and thirds, and it's making me feel like this is a personal thing. It's not dramatic. It's not anything else. It's telling me a story, and it's also inviting me to listen. And if I didn't know anything about the background of the piece, I might think it was even a little sad.
What I'm noticing real quick is we're using a lot of 1 and 3, and just for anybody looking at this, the score is written in E flat major, but the music is written in E flat minor. So we've got that E flat to G flat minor thing, and it's repeated 3 times in that first 2 measures. So that's kind of that little upward third is a real part of the melody so far. And it's kind of staying right around where it is. I say music is stretchy. Wherever you start, music kind of wants to snap back to that when you're done. And this, it starts really kind of on that E flat, jumps up to it from the B flat, but it starts on that E flat. It gets as high as A flat, and then kind of pulls and snaps back down. And it's kind of rotating around that space right now. It does peak up to that A flat, but otherwise it kind of drops back and stays right where it is. It's as if it's just taking a little bit of a step and reaching out a little bit.
It feels like an initial call that hasn't been finished yet. It's It's just a really nice compact phrase that fits within this structure really well. And I have a suspicion, perhaps I make an academic thought here, but I want to wait to surprise you with it. So
Okay. I'm going to play that again. Let's go ahead and do the first 4 measures. So what are we seeing now?
we're seeing the beauty of theme and variation, which is a hallmark of my own improvising style, and in some cases in the way that I write. And I think Mingus is a master of this. He's giving us another taste of the same thing with just a little wrinkle on it, and making sure that if we didn't hear the call the first time, that what he's telling us is of import. The intervallic relationships look very similar. The rhythmic relationships are very similar, and it's just it's a lovely way to keep from playing the same thing over and over again. Just little changes in the melody to accompany some interesting changes in the harmony as well.
Yeah, in terms of motifs, we've got that upward third.
Mm-hmm.
We have after the second upward third, it goes up a little bit higher. Didn't really point this out the first time, but we have that kind of fast turn that repeats twice the first time we hear it, the melody, and kind of wraps up the melody in the first measure, and it repeats almost exactly the same in 2 times again in the third and fourth measures. The only real significant difference in the first 2 measures and the second 2 measures is when we reach up just a little bit higher. And it's interesting because we reach kind of out of the key and land a little bit, land back on the A flat. So we go up to, in this case, an A natural and land on that A flat. So we've kind of repeated, but we've kind of also stretched up a little bit, but then sort of just rhymed the first 2 measures with the second part of the second 2 measures.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's this kind of thinking has been very formational in my learning as a writer and as an improviser. To me, that's the best part of getting someone's attention. So
I'm going to play this from the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and play through 6 measures this time. Okay. And also, as you're listening, I've got the chords included here. Listen to how the chords kind of are. They're definitely not what we have in our normal sort of song or pop stuff. The chords behind the music vary a lot compared to how you have in normal sort of pop songs or traditional songs. Continuing looking at this, we have some things that are the same and we have some things that are different.
I really feel like Mingus and Mahler must have known each other. This is the place where he takes these themes and these intervals that we've talked about, and he starts expanding on them. And there's technically not really that much new information. It's just where he's placed everything. Let's move it up a little higher. Let's take these minor third and perfect fourth motifs and reiterate them, but in a different way. And then he leads us into what's going to be almost like a developmental section by stretching out what he's already given us and moving it around a little bit. It's just lovely.
Yeah, and what I'm noticing, looking at it from sort of a linear standpoint here, we never have yet gotten up to the 5th of the chord. We've gone up that minor third. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the 5th and 6th measures, rather than starting on the 5 and jumping up to 1, we're starting on 1 and we jump up to 5.
Hmm.
And not only do we jump up to 5, we jump up higher than we've been at all. We jump up to the flat 7. We jump up to that D flat up there.
Yeah.
And that's this part right here. That is the highest spot that we've been. It's also repeating, like you say, it's repeating that minor third pattern, but we're a fifth up from where we started.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have very much the same rhythm as we've had previously. We have the 2 eighth notes tied together with a triplet in the second part. So you've got that da 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 da. So you've still got that going, but the notes are in different places. So we have a similar rhythmic pattern, but a different place that the notes are residing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And in the sixth measure, so after we've had that minor third that's now a fifth up, he repeats that pattern again, and it's instead of being a minor third, it's a major fourth. So now it's all the way an octave up, and we get to hit that tonic note all the way an octave up above where we'd been before. And then very much stretchy music, it starts pulling back down towards where we started.
Yeah, it's bringing us into a new thought, but still related to the original thought. Still keeping the sort of rules that he established in the first 2 measures.
And this is the first place where we have sort of a significant downbeat on the 3. Mm-hmm. We have a downward minor third.
Yep.
Otherwise, every place else we really have, where it's any place strong, we have an upward minor third. But now at the second part of measure 6, we have this downward minor third taking us back down to where we are starting. And I think, I don't know, I still hear that as the minor third, but it's backwards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, listening to this, that still is there. And it kind of surprises me that I'm like, oh yeah, that's the same thing, but just in reverse. And sounds like a stupid thing to say. It's the same thing, but in reverse.
But that's good. That's good composing. That's using all of the elements that made the core of your melody to keep it interesting. I think that's a hallmark. Yeah. Do it in reverse, do it upside down, do it backwards, whatever you got to do,
Yeah, and backwards and upside down. Never forget backwards and upside down. All right. So let's go ahead and start on measure 5 and 6, and we'll go ahead and go through 7 and 8. Now that we've got something slightly different going on, how would you describe measures 7 and 8?
I mean, holy development, Batman. There's a part of all of this that you just look at the harmonic language that he's sticking with, and looking at we're seeing movements of the minor third. But now we've got 2 movements of a fifth in a row also happening, if you count that B natural in the previous measure. And then just really getting a bright color moving to this C7 and this F13, then to the B7 and the E major 7. Just those are bright chords, and it's kind of remarkably placed in the middle of this piece is written about mourning someone, but it's just colorfully beautiful and represents a break a little bit melodically and certainly harmonically and a little bit rhythmically, but sticks with the flavor that he's established.
What I'm seeing, I hadn't even noticed that the leap up there is a fifth, so it is really the first, other than the going into measure 6. It's another leap. So it's not the first. It's another leap of a fifth there, rather than jumping up just a fourth. What I was catching was we've got that minor third at the beginning of that measure, but then in that same pattern, because we've had minor third up,
then kind of minor third up, but take a little bit higher. This time we're actually dropping down, but then leaping up to the same top note that previously was there in the minor third. So right here, this is going into that measure. You have the minor third, but you also have sort of, it takes you away from, like, farther, it takes you down. And to me, that kind of stepward down feeling gives it a melancholy to that reaching up to that same note.
Absolutely. And melancholy, yeah, that has been escaping me. I think that's a really great description of this whole kind of thing. Yeah.
And then we get to measure 8. And for anybody looking at the score here, you'll see that it's F sharp and D sharp. And that's, I mean, the chord that is being played there, it's marked as being a B7. And so the F sharp and the D sharp are in B7, but they are also the third note and the first note of our E flat scale. They're enharmonic for our E flat. So it's basically back to doing 3-1, but now we're doing that minor third down, which maybe that minor third in measure 6 was sort of a foreshadowing of this minor third down, this slow minor third down that's in measure 8. But it's suddenly, instead of having eighth notes almost everywhere, eighth notes and thirds and 16th notes, now we got this nice long half note on the third dropping down to the tonic. We're not there chordally yet. I mean, as far as where the foundation of the melody is, we're landing basically back on 1, but the chords are nowhere near 1 at this point.
So we've really got stretched away. I mean, we started in an E flat 7 sharp 9, and now we get that note and we're on an E major 7. It's just like, wow. Circle of fifths.
It's a lot of fifths to have to go through to get back to 1.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's go ahead and play that measure 7 and 8, and we're going to go ahead and play through, I think we'll just play through the next 2 measures after that. Let's play that part. Didn't mean to go quite that far, but we're still doing a very similar thing. Kind of wandering around. We did that minor third again, very slow, just 2 half notes.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of wandering around. I know in the music, those notes in measure 10 are marked as being straight eighths, not supposed to be swung. It's supposed to be just very steady notes in that particular spot. But it's kind of unlike really anything else other than maybe the second half of measure 6, where all we have is just downward notes.
Yeah. I almost feel like this is material that he took from the beats 3 and 4 of the first measure, or beats 3 and 4 of the second measure, and just stretched it out and put it in there. It's still derived from the things that we talked about before. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, if you look at measure 10, it is the first 4 notes are very much the second part of measure 1, and the second 4 notes are very much the second half of measure 3. So it's as if he's pulling stuff from earlier and reusing it.
It's making me feel guilty as a composer to make sure that I can write out every permutation I can think of, because this is just remarkable.
And again, where you're looking at it and we have the F sharp down to D sharp, that's the same as going 3-1 in our key of E flat minor. It's the same as G flat down to E flat. And the only reason they're showing it differently is because the chords that are being played, behind them, those notes, when you display them as the enharmonic, they fit into the chords that are being played behind them.
Yeah.
It's enharmonically the same note. All right, I'm going to go back to right before measure 8, and I'm going to play it out through the end so we can hear all of those nice slow notes until we're getting to the end of the melody. The melody actually is at least in the fake book, it's designed to just go ahead and repeat once it gets to the end. So I'll go ahead and let it play into the repeat so you can kind of hear that how that repeat works. So that looped it back around to the front. The melody basically just kind of doesn't land there the first time through. It doesn't land on the end. It just kind of carries back around to the beginning. Mm-hmm. Let me go ahead and play the end, how it would sound without that repeat.
Okay.
Just from the last 4 measures. So that's how the fake book shows it happening. Interestingly, at least in terms of jazz and fake books, this is the first time in a long time that I can remember just solidly landing on 1 on a jazz piece as the last note. It was something when I was in school learning or trying to learn to play jazz, very much my instructors would say, don't dwell on the tonic. In some place where you're landing at the end of a piece or something like that, the tonic isn't important. It's in the bass, and it's going to be a more interesting note if it's someplace else.
There's some certainly some validity to that, so that raises the question: why did he end on the tonic? And I have a thought, and it's just because the nature of this piece being sort of a mourning a friend and a mentor. He just wanted it to have no color necessarily to it in the melody, to just let it be the end of this call, this appreciation of this person, and keep it simple. That's me. My opinion overpriced it free, but I just kind of think about all of the colors and everything we've been given, and to end so simply just feels like it's a sign of respect.
It does feel kind of more landed, more grounded at the end of this, or if that's the way that it's written. It ends solidly, very much an ending, and very much kind of a peaceful ending, I think.
Yeah, like that.
And again, back to music being stretchy, we started out leaping up to E flat at the bottom of the treble clef. We started out with that leap of a 4th up to E flat, and then we end with a leap up to E flat, but we end on that E flat. We stretch all the way up an octave and then gradually pull back around to where we are on that tonic again, melodically.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. It's really nicely done. So, you ready for me to blow your mind?
Do it.
How many bars does this have, Arthur?
It's a 12-bar piece. I noticed that when I was making sure that the Muse score music was there, and it occurred to me 12 bars. There are a lot of things musically that are related to 12 bars. Blow my mind.
I think this is a 12-bar minor blues.
Wow. Oh.
I think this is a 12-bar minor blues, and he has done some chord substitution things that are just delicious.
Okay, so to bring people up to speed who are not the more musical crowd. No, this is absolutely what this podcast is about. Musically, there are a number of different forms of music. There is your typical song, which is like an A, where you've got verse, chorus, verse, or things like that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of music is designed to kind of fit like poetry. So you usually have sets of 2 or 4 measures because it makes a nice little verse in the terms of something like a poem. And it starts, if you're doing very traditional, very kind of stodgy music, you stick with those 4-bar measures, and you usually have sets of 2 or sets of 4-bar measures. And the folks who broke those rules, when they broke them, it was shocking and so forth in the past. 12-bar blues is a jazz structure that doesn't work quite the same as, what you think of as more traditional classical structure. It doesn't go with this sort of 1-4-5-1 progression. And in fact, it doesn't even really have a 5-1 progression in it. It's usually done, I'd say more popularly done, with major chords. But again, you've got when it's blues, so you have major chords, but you've got like a blue third. And that comes a lot from kind of a microtonality of some of jazz's roots, that you have that minor third kind of laying on a major background. And it's because really, I think, my understanding is that musically in our evenly tempered music, where every single note is a half step apart from the other note, it's not as colorful, and there's not as many notes that you can play that are kind of between notes that come from some musical traditions. And the roots of jazz have notes that don't fit exactly into our regular keys and our regular half step notes.
Absolutely.
So the 12-bar blues structure, if you hear somebody talking about the blues, it's generally a 12-bar structure. Yeah, so it goes up to 4 and then can go up to 5 and then to 4 and then back down to 1. Starts out really on 1, goes 1 to 1 and 4, then does 5 and 4 and 1.
Mm-hmm. And I think that Mingus used a lot of structures that he was very comfortable with, because he felt like he could just turn himself loose inside of that. This is a form I'm comfortable writing in, and I've got this idea, and I'm going to make it fit. And it's remarkable because it expands on the things that we know. Every Mingus composition to me has been an education. It's beautiful to be able to have this conversation with you, because it's really the foundation of it. So,
well, with the idea that this is a 12-bar blues, it's also interesting structurally that he doesn't keep it fixed into 4 sets of 4 bars, because in bar 8, you've got that first example of 2 long notes. It's kind of coming as an ending in those 4 bars, but then he uses it as sort of the statement in that last 4 bars, where that minor third going down is, it's very much stated and very much a major part of what's being talked about musically there.
Yeah. And it's, I think you used the term contour when we were talking before, and I was thinking about the shape of the phrases, but then I also started thinking about, how are they laid out? And there's a 2-bar phrase and a 2-bar phrase, and then almost almost a 5-bar phrase. And then a 3-bar phrase at the very end, sort of getting us back in. Or we could, maybe we could quibble about the middle being maybe a 3-bar and then a 5-bar. I mean, we could absolutely reverse that. But it's definitely not organized in a 2 + 2 = 4 kind of way. He's got this freedom to draw the melody out as he needs to, and the comfort to be able to change harmonically as he'd like to, and it's really something.
It ends up being, in some ways, it almost ends up sounding like a prepared improvisation or a written out improvisation, where he hits these motifs or these phrases, and when he lands on them, he's like, well, I'm going to repeat that phrase again. And the second 4 bars really comes across almost being like 3 bars and then a statement, but then he makes that statement again.
I love the way you put that idea. That's, that really, it feels like, he's got a general idea and he's improvising. He's, it's a place where composition and improvisation kind of run into each other. And that's, it's a really remarkable gap in there, and I'm as a composer, I'm still working on trying to close that spot up. I think he just had it mastered. I think that was his playground. So it's really remarkable.
Yeah, and it feels, looking again at it, looks like the to me there's a solid cell in the first two measures that's repeated in the second two measures.
Mhm.
And then he's sort of broken it down so the third set of two measures, it's two separate cells, one measure each. And then that next measure, in measure 7, it almost feels like he's broken it down into halves of a measure.
Yeah.
So the same overall structure has started long, he's broken it in half, he's broken it in half again. And then we get to those long notes.
Yeah. Almost a moment of pause and reflection.
Yeah, this melody looks like it's something that would take a lot longer than one podcast to just find all of the different treasures that are inside it.
Yeah, it's we picked a good one.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Anything else you want to say about this before we go ahead and take another break?
Just the Mingus's ensemble really gave him also a lot of freedom. The notion that these players were going to do something that wasn't a straight up blues or straight up rhythm changes or anything else, and we're going to do this music in a different way is a testament to their commitment to him as a band leader and a composer as well. So, and they have some there's some pretty remarkable musicians that played with him. So, I try to remember to credit the people that are helping tell this story, because it would be different if it's just him playing it on the bass, but the 3 saxophones, 2 trombones, the drummer, and the piano player really helped bring this home.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and take a break, and we will come back and we'll talk about what's going on with you.
Thanks.
We are back with the Melodology podcast, celebrating the unsung excellence of melody makers. I am here today with a very talented melody maker, Scott Halgren, and this part of the podcast is talking about you, Scott. So you brought some show and tell today. What do you have to tell us about what you brought?
Well, I shared a couple of melodies that are probably some of the happier things that I've ever written, which is sort of ironic since the most successful thing I've ever written is kind of sad and melancholy. But I brought a piece from my 2010 album called Milonga, and then I brought a piece from a film score I did a couple of years ago called Snow Globe and the Cat. They're some examples of me working with a smaller ensemble to tell a story. And they're some of my favorite, and of course I'm biased, melodies of my own, let's see. Or they're the ones I'm least embarrassed of. How about that?
All right, well, let's go ahead and listen to Milonga first. That is so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I mean, who doesn't love a tango, basically, is what's going on there.
Yeah, I was challenged to write a tango, and I wrote a grande tango for an organization in Nashville for a friend, Porteña, named Diana Holland. And from that came an entire suite, and that was the second piece in the suite. And the idea of milonga and not being so serious and having fun and a nighttime party of people who were enjoying each other and the night and really is the basis for all of that. So,
well, and to carry over a theme from what we were talking about with jazz before, you have two improvisations over the chord progression in this, first with the piano and then with the accordion.
Oh, some fantastic musicians on this. Yes, Chris Walters on the piano and Jeff Green on the accordion, a musician so formidable that no one wants to solo after him. And that just brought some real joy to this performance. And those improvisations, being their own melodies, and I love hearing and giving our musicians the opportunity to bring their take to things when it's appropriate. And that's I felt very blessed that I got those two to commit that to immortality. Yeah, lots of great things in there. So.
Yeah, that's the kind of piece of music that I would listen to first thing on a weekend morning to kind of get my step going.
Oh, thanks.
All right. So tell us about this next piece.
So the next piece is for a short film that was directed by Rick Page, who's a director of photography out of L.A. And he came to Cleveland to do a short with a workforce development program at Cuyahuga Community College, and it came out really, really well. And nutshell, it's a divorced couple, sort of reconciling before he moves away to Florida at Christmas time. But not before his ex-wife does a number on his snow globe collection because she's really mad at him. And so my goal was to provide some levity to this situation, which could otherwise have been seen as not quite as funny. It's a little slapsticky, and it's a little sad. So I had to sort of bring up the whole thing, and the giveaway is at the very end. This music starts right before the ex-husband character has faked his own death and is lying on the floor, and she leaves, and he gets up and opens his eyes, and he looks grateful that she's gone, and we cut to black and this music. So it was kind of to give you a comedic flavor at the end of the movie. So
it could have been just dark, but this makes it into solidly dark comedy.
Yes, and it's kind of what we talked about before. I'm like, all right, I got to give the audience kind of a ha-ha on the way out. So I got lucky.
All right, so. Here we go. That is a hoot.
I don't know where it comes from sometimes.
Oh, that's just so much fun. And the references to dashing through the woods, the little Christmas references in there are hysterical. I like about halfway through, it sort of becomes like the I don't know. To me, that's the kind of music I would expect to see in a very Ozzie and Harriet neighborhood driving down the street sort of thing, where it's just very wholesome and
you're calling out my tell there. It's very much. I had some of that in mind, thinking about the history of this couple and now they're much older and splitting up and everything, but thinking about the things that they had seen and whatnot, and so thank you. You nailed me.
and great use of the motifs at the beginning and the end. Where you've got it at the beginning. If you didn't bring it back at the very end, that opening part might have maybe been something that people might have been forgetting a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
But by bringing it back at the end, with the humor of it not going through the whole thing and kind of ending abruptly, was very nicely done. That's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, the director was concerned because we actually started working on this piece before we did anything else in the movie. And then and he was like, well, he's like, I see where you're going, but can you make it work in the rest of the movie? And the first piece was actually me doing, at the very beginning of the movie, me doing a take on the Charlie Brown Christmas Tree variation. And then the second piece was the battle between the two of them where she's breaking his snow globes. And I used that theme again in that battle sequence. And so the third of the four parts of that last cue was from that battle sequence to stretch out the cues a little bit to suit the credits. So yeah, I try to be fair to my motifs and to make sure I give the listener something to grab onto. And of course, the Christmas thing was I feel like I've just got kind of lucky because it's set during Christmas time and it was an easy go. There's snow globes and Christmas trees and lights everywhere, so it's really funny.
And the name of this again?
The Snow Globe and the Cat.
Snow Globe and the Cat. And that track was "And the Credits."
Yeah.
All right.
So
what's going on with you?
Well, I'm really excited because I've just finished another movie with Rick, the director of Snow Globes, called Minutes to Go, and just finished a 6-minute cue for him, which might be one of the longest things I've ever written. And we got that done, and I also have been asked to score a beer documentary, and I'm going to be doing logos and bumpers for a film festival. And then even more exciting, but maybe terrifying, in October, the first week of October, I will be conducting the main titles to Chinatown, To Kill a Mockingbird, and Cinema Paradiso with a small orchestra at the Chagrin Documentary Festival. And then on November the 5th, I will be conducting the entire score of Snow Globe and the score to the movie I did last summer, The Resistance, to picture with a live orchestra.
How fun.
And I'm terrified because I have not conducted live in longer than I want to admit. So I've got some prep I need to do. But the rest of the year is full of good things. So
what an amazing opportunity. And those are happening where again?
The movie themes are being performed as the closing night of the Chagrin Documentary Festival in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. And then the concert is at Cuyahuga Community College on November the 8th. And I think it's free. So I think both of them should be free. I'll have to check on that. But just exciting. I'm not a longtime Cleveland resident. I've not quite been here 7 years, but the artistic community here is fantastic and viable and lively, and it just gives so many opportunities. So I'm very grateful.
Anything else you'd like to say?
I would I would love it if anybody wants to hit me up on my social media. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and I have a Vimeo page with some of my work. I go under the moniker of Scootman Music. That's SCOOTMAN Music, all one word, in those sites. And then I have a Linktree location. If you look up Linktree and Scott Halgren, HALLGREN, you can find out about my Sheet Music Plus account, where you can actually buy the music to some of the things you've heard today. I've got a Spotify, a couple of records on Spotify, and I have a Bandcamp, and also a copy of my book about the career development and networking side of composing, all on that Linktree site as well. So if you'd like to reach out or just check anything out further, I'd certainly be grateful and happy to talk with anybody. So,
and I will be sure that there are links to all of those things in the program notes so people can find you without having to randomly try and figure out how to type stuff in if they didn't catch that. So there will be links to everything in the show notes as well. Scott, this has been a lot of fun today. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for a jazz tune, which, again, first time we've done specifically something that's really just straight up a jazz tune and not something that's been adopted by jazz from another medium.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I'm really grateful, and this has been an awful lot of fun. I wish that we could do things like this more often, and I think people should be looking at things like this. We get so much from it, and it's a part of why music makes our lives better every single day. So
careful what you wish for. I might invite you back.
I probably wouldn't say no.
All right. Well, I'll take you up on that. This is the Melodology podcast, celebrating the unsung excellence of melody makers. On the social media and on Patreon, it is just Melody Podcast, and the website is melodologypodcast.com. I am Arthur Breur, your host. It is Arthur Breur, Breur. My last name is 5 letters, and the last 3 letters look like the beginning of the word Europe. I am Arthur Breur on all of the social medias. I create music drawn from your heart. That's a tagline that was given to me by the amazing Stephen Schaumler. So I'm also music drawn from your heart, or music drawn from the heart, on Instagram. And we look forward to having all of our listeners back for the next podcast.